Good afternoon, all. My name is Orla Martin. I'm Head of Enterprise in the Local Enterprise Office here in Offaly County Council. We're delighted to welcome you all this afternoon to this free 1-hour webinar that we're partnering with Retail Excellence Ireland on. And the format for the 1-hour presentation is firstly a presentation by David Fitzsimons, Group Chief Executive of Retail Excellence Ireland. And David, who people will have heard on the radio morning, noon and night over the past number of months, will be talking through the main issues affecting retail and the trends internationally and some steps that retailers can take to assist themselves. I will be speaking a little bit on the supports from the Local Enterprise Office and from Offaly County Council. And then we're delighted also to have Jim Power, economist, who will speak through on the global trends and impacts and also very much from an Irish perspective. So we hope you find the seminar very beneficial and thank you very much.
So, hi everyone, thanks Orla, and thanks to everyone in Offaly County Council for facilitating our webinar today. So look, I'm just going to, as Orla said, talk through some of the stuff that's happening in retail. So Keelan, if you push on. So just a brief update on where we're at with government, some macro trends we're seeing, new ways of retailing, assessing the impact on different sectors in retail, some tips to assist, likely demand, then it's back to Orla, and then it's over to Jim. So let's go. Thanks, Keelan. So an update on matters. So yeah, we've called on the government to deliver a rent grant equivalent to about 60% of the cost of the rent during the period of emergency. They are looking at the Swedish model, which is a 50% grant. We actually like the Danish model. And by the way, all these slides and a video will be sent to everyone, so there's no need to take loads of notes. But look, we do need a rent scheme of some sort because otherwise we're going to struggle. On rates, the government has obviously launched a 3 months rates waiver. We're pushing for it to be pushed out to 12 months. At the moment, it's not fit for purpose, and we're looking at other markets where it's 12 months like the UK and such like. So look, we're working with government on that regard. And finally, I suppose liquidity. Look, the big solution that we're supporting is the SME recovery team solution, which is led by John Moore, the ex-Sec-Gen of Finance. And it's quite simple. And we're having lots of conversations with lots of senior politicians. It's two-step. It's give everyone a loan for whatever amount of money they need at 0%. And then step 2, establish a revenue overseeing compensation scheme where everyone can make claims for losses sustained over the period of COVID rather than profits foregone. And that includes the guys that remained open during the pandemic, like pharmacy and grocery, because they've also potentially lost money. So that's where our government, I suppose the last government update is a Monday evening. I spoke to the Department of Business and they have agreed that on the 1st of June, they will conduct a review of the phases to come, and we're putting huge pressure on them to open everyone up quicker because obviously guys waiting until the 10th of August when shopping centres can reopen, it's just the longest in Europe and it's way too long. Okay, Keelan, thanks. So some macro trends that will impact us all. So in Offaly, homework is as pertinent as anywhere else. So we're going to see this trend remain. We've seen CEOs in large companies talk about it being a permanent fixture in their people's lives. So potentially there's going to be less cars leaving Tullamore of a Monday morning going to Dublin. And those shoppers and people will remain home. They potentially will go downtown. They'll go into the pharmacy, go into the butchers, potentially go into Galvin for Men and all that kind of stuff. So the spend that potentially was in Dublin previously with Offaly commuters will now hopefully remain in Offaly, and that's a good thing. Number 2, obviously shopping is incredibly tactile, enjoyable. That's all changed. And we now see as people reopen capacity limits, reduced dwell time, it's all very functional. Nobody's walking into a store today to browse. Everybody's going with a shopping list to buy. So as we see the 8th of June, the biggest reopening ever in the history of our state, the biggest jolt to the economy in the history of our state, we'll see all this very functional shopping behavior. Okay, new retailing ways will emerge. We'll deal with that now. We're seeing people reassessing what's important in life. And what we're seeing potentially is people thinking about shopping locally and supporting independence which we support, and hopefully that'll have a really positive impact on towns and villages across Offaly. I just put in the events, so we've no events, weddings, funerals, we've nowhere to go. So that's obviously having a negative impact in terms of menswear and ladies' wear, fashion and whatever. And finally, to try and be positive, look, we're all social creatures, and we all at some point will want to return to the pub, to the restaurant, to our amazing shopping experiences. So look, let's all keep the faith. Thanks, Keenan. So just new ways of retailing. Okay, so number one, we're seeing Argos style model coming. So this is where a retailer will open up with a counter close to the front door and all of the product is behind. And potentially you'll have colleagues run to get the item for a customer as they wait at the counter. Online is growing exponentially, and I have a slide to demonstrate that in a little while. And in fairness to the Leos and in fairness to Enterprise Ireland, there's lots of supports out there. We're going to see online changing in terms of online chat solutions, telesales. So let's say you're going online to buy paint. It's a consultative purchase. So up will pop a chat bot and they'll ask, well, do you want a colleague to join you? Colleague then joins and says, hi there, John. Yeah, you're looking at paint. You need this, that, and the other. You also need that type of brush. And this is how much paint you need because it's a big house. So online is going to change and develop into selling far more consultative items like prams and books and whatever, as well as the standard stuff. Number three, reservation only is a big thing. So actually, in fairness to Les in Galvin for Men, he ran a reservation only retail evenings for autism customers, and it proved really well. So an awful lot of retailers are reopening, and they might be doing 10 till 6 in the day, and everyone can come, and there's queues and all that stuff. But from 6 to 8 p.m., you might consider having a reservation only opportunity for customers that don't want to queue and they're feeling vulnerable. So the elderly, people with underlying issues who would love to come into Galvin for Men or a pharmacy or an optician on an appointment basis, know it's safe and all that stuff. So there's a link there to a complimentary free appointments bit of software you could use. Next is drive-through. So anyone with a car park or car park capability potentially could mark out some bays and allow a customer to click and collect and come up and roll up into bay one, and you'll text them or they'll text you and say they're outside, and you simply open the boot and off they go. So utilization of car parks over the next coming weeks are going to be huge. Next is open air retailing. So think of Halford. So potentially, can you move some of the items, some of the rails outside? Is there space? I know in every town, and pedestrianisation, I know it's a hot topic everywhere, but obviously towns and local government are having to do what central government and the healthcare guys are advising them to do, and that's pedestrianising everything. So potentially that'll give you space to use the space outside of your store to retail. And finally, pay by text. Click on that link and you'll see this new AIB product. So it's all very secure. There's no over the phone sharing of credit card details. It's all done by text. So have a look at that. Thanks, Keelan. So look, I put that in just to prove the Argos style way of retailing. This is Lush, would you believe, in the UK. So you can see there the colleagues, they have a counter, they have a space where the customer stands, and all of the products are behind. And you walk up, stand in the space, and you ask for the item. And this is incredible because obviously Lush is a highly sensory, tactile retail environment, but this is how they're reopening. And this is what some of us are going to have to consider doing in the short term. Thanks, Keelan. So I just thought I'd put this in because this is the only drive-through pharmacy in Ireland. So this is Ronan Mulligan down in Waterford, and I know people on the call would know Ronan well. So it just coincidentally happened that he built a drive-through a couple of years back. He didn't know about COVID. But look, the point here is we all can't build this overnight. But certainly if you're a hardware store with a yard at the back, you can very simply run a click and collect system whereby people can come without going into the store and literally just you pack their car with the items they bought online or they bought over the phone. Thanks, Keelan. So how is it going to impact everyone? So I've put a quick graph together. On the y-axis, the time it's going to take to recover. On the bottom axis, the need to adapt how we retail. So look, tourism dependent is up the top there. God love them. They're gonna have to wait till next year really for visitors to come, and even at that, we're likely to be down 60-70%. They won't have to adapt much because by the time the visitors come, a vaccine will hopefully have been found. But if you look at the top right, obviously these guys are going to open in the short to medium time, like entertainment, cinemas as an example. The level of adaptation is going to be huge. You know, they're talking about reducing down the number of screenings of films, so there's no gathering in the lobby. They're going to open 1/3 of seating. It's just nuts. But the rest of us are kind of down in the bottom left there, in terms of some level of adaptation and some time to kind of recover and get open. So if you look at pharmacy today and Perspex glass and spacing and distancing, you know, we're all going to have to do that. So some simple tips and hints for people is, if somebody goes into a fashion retailer to try on an item, don't buy it. If you have a steamer, just steam the item and put it back out for sale. If you're an optician, a jeweler, and somebody picks up a ring or a watch or whatever, again, just have a tray where the customer will put it back on the tray, having not bought it. You simply spray it and then you can put it with disinfectant and put it back out. So it's all about common sense, reassuring everyone that everybody's safe and you're responsible retailers. Okay, thanks, Keelan. So some tips. Large stores can open in the small store phase if they become a small store by closing off some space. So we don't know what a small store is. The government haven't defined it. So if you're a big enough store, you can open by closing off a bit of space. Okay, so some retailers are going to have to rethink their merchandise, because if they're selling to visitors, they're not selling to visitors. So potentially, you know, we're going to have to change our merchandise for a COVID era. Online virtual shopping could be considered. So what you might do is take a video of your store, put it up on your website, and that means customers can have a look at your merchandise. They can pause and say, oh, that's a lovely tie. I put that in my basket. Consider selling on social media platforms, which obviously are crucial in terms of fashion, but also pharmacy in terms of beauty. So the level of online beauty and cosmetic activity today in Ireland is off the charts. Perhaps you're going to have to remove some fixturing to make space for customers. That's a temporary thing. We need to do it. Consider online marketplaces. So Bazoo is really good in fashion, eBay, all these guys, you know that. So we need to look at every single channel to sell our product, because we're going to be a little bit under pressure for the next while. Open air, as I mentioned, is going to grow. The most important thing is communication. So lots of posters. So when you open up on the 8th of June, there should be a poster outside the store saying we're delighted to reopen. Our maximum capacity is 5 customers. We'll try and reduce browsing time. We've taken lots of precautions to make everything really, really safe, and we're delighted to be reopened. So, and obviously we need to communicate the same way to colleagues in terms of them being really safe. So bring them back a day early and tell them about the washing hands, tell them about the canteens change, tell them about where they must stand serving customers. And then everything's going to be really safe, and we'll reopen really, really successfully. Thanks, Keelan. So I put this in just to depress you all. So this is a survey we conducted there. It was in the Irish Times the other day, of 360 CEOs, and it's basically looking at their forecasted demand revenues for the next period to the end of 2021. Everyone's different. Gardens centres less impacted because it's outdoor and it's space and it's safe. So if you add back the online surge, which you can see there, the predicted online surge, in a nutshell, retail in Ireland will be down 30% this year, 20% next year. So it's a bleak and challenging outlook, but we'll get through it. Thanks, Keelan. So I think this is my last slide. Likely demand. We're going to see on the 8th of June the kind of pent-up demand phase in terms of people coming out with shopping lists, stuff to get. The DIY guys, the garden guys saw that there last Monday week, obviously, and everything was done really well and safely. Obviously, there's some of you who have no pent-up demand. So if you own a coffee shop and you're reopening on the 8th, or you're open today, you're not seeing somebody buy 200 cups of coffee because they haven't seen you for 2 months. So the next point is we then, after the pent-up demand phase, things kind of quieten down a bit and it becomes more subdued. And that's a challenge. And we get to a point where we're at the bottom and we'll start recovering. And Jim will mention what type of recovery we are expecting. In terms of the worst impacted places around the world and the EU is micro economies, which are tourism dependent. So Venice, Paris. So Paris today, there's 3 million population, normally 13 million, but that's because all the tourists are gone and a lot of workers are working from home. So this is challenging, and we have calls at Mayo County Council and Kerry County Council and all. And there's some places in Ireland that just, the micro economy is under pressure because lots of people have lost their jobs because they work in visitor-facing sectors. And the last point I put in, which is just a point that I think we haven't concentrated on, there's people on this call that have liquidity issues and will continue to have liquidity issues. So look, the government and the Revenue have launched a tax warehousing initiative for SMEs, whereby you don't pay your POIE, your PRSI, you don't pay your VAT, and if you're a forecourt or whatever, you don't pay your excise. You do your VAT return and your PE return, but you don't give them the money. So, you know, that potentially is going to expand over the next couple of months, hopefully. So potentially just to reduce the kind of negativity and levels of depression, potentially you can agree with the Revenue that you won't pay the POIE, the PRSI, the VAT for the next number of months, and that'll give you the opportunity to build a sustainable P&L and to trade through and survive. So I think that's me, Keelan, is it? So just a couple of contact numbers. So to our members, keep in touch. If you're not a member, you're welcome to join. Complimentary HR, complimentary legal. And to finish, just to say, well done, Orla, and everyone in Offaly County Council. And look, let's get back to business safely. But God, it'll be great when we reopen our doors. So thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And thanks, Keelan, if you want to move on. So I'd like to cover just quite briefly a little overview from an Offaly perspective, the response to COVID-19 from Offaly County Council and the Leo office, and then just to give a little more detail on some of the key business supports. So extraordinary times for every business. We know the focus of this is on retail, but across the board through all businesses, we've seen it just an extraordinarily difficult time. The issues, they're generally largely similar, you know, I mean, obviously there are differences, but it's cash flow, there are HR, human resource issues, technology issues, safe working, the environment for staff and for also for customers, and then stock issues. Some issues we found are things we noted both in Offaly but across the board, across the Leo network. Businesses that had done an element of Brexit preparedness, they were in a better position. Some of them had brought in a lot of extra stock and had protected their distribution lines, so they were better placed when this hit, when COVID-19 hit. We also found that those who had invested with their own time in management development programs were also quicker and able to respond to the issues. So I think it is a lesson there that the time people spend in investing in attending certain programs, relevant programs, run either through the local enterprise office or Retail Excellence Ireland or whoever, that they will benefit your business. Lots of variations between sectors across the board. So for example, in food businesses, those that were supplying into food service were just terribly affected, whereas those supplying into food retail had a better story. And then there were lots of different examples of businesses pivoting. Moore Gin, a gin producer here in Tullamore, it started producing hand sanitizers. O'Donoghue Bakery in Tullamore started providing flour as well for the dramatic upturn in people baking at home. So, but extraordinary time. So Keelan, if you want to move on, thanks. But it also has to be said, I think, an extraordinary response for any of us who've worked in enterprise development, you know, over a number of years. We're seeing such a coordinated response of supports from national government, local government and state agencies. So David had covered a number of them, but people will be well aware of the range of financial and enterprise supports available across the board. I think it's worth noting there are weekly conference calls that I represent the Midland Leos, local enterprise offices. We've weekly conference with the department, with Enterprise Ireland and the regional network of local enterprise offices. And it's a great opportunity to feed back stories from the ground, what businesses are actually saying to us, what they're finding. And that's been fed back to the department, and in lots of ways we've had very positive interactions and amendments by the department to pivot and change, tweak different schemes. So I would encourage people that if they have different concerns or things they want to highlight, to email the local enterprise office, let us know so we can feed that back at a national level. So the Leos were on the ground locally, 31 across the country, but networked nationally across the country. So then just our response. So the key supports. So free COVID mentoring, so free one-to-one advice and mentoring for all businesses. We found in the beginning when COVID-19 hit, everyone was in such shock. So it was really, really useful then to be able to put a business strategy or a finance mentor in touch with a business and help them just act as a sounding board, give advice, suggestions for how they deal with the situation, maybe by reducing outgoings and protecting cash. Holding on to cash has been hugely important. And then dealing with forced enclosures, really, as in the retail. So lots of advice and guidance to businesses, and we're available, the Leo team is available on the phone and by email. And again, very positive responses from people just being able to talk to somebody else and to get some guidance and hints and tips. Lots of free online training and webinars. David has talked a lot about the online and the focus of online. And it was great, quite seamlessly moved our physical training courses and webinars online, and we've increased the numbers of types of courses hugely. So ones that may be of interest to people that are coming up, and so how to create marketing videos on a budget, the trading online voucher, which I'll explain a little bit more about, but the mentoring on that, how to reopen your business safely, how you deal in terms of communications, staff, action plans, reopening hair and beauty businesses, plan a pathway to new standards, and how to plan a new website for your business. And lots of different courses coming up all the time, so definitely keep an eye on the website. The trading online voucher, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail, but that's €2,500 with 10% match funding and a second voucher available, and the microfinance loan fund, which is up to €50,000. Thanks, Keelan. So the trading online voucher, this one is to help businesses to start selling online. So it's up to €2,500 for the e-commerce and digital marketing activities for a business. And so the e-commerce part would be 70% of it, but digital marketing, you could also spend up to 30% of that amount on the digital marketing. The match funding for now has been reduced. It used to be 50%. You spent up to €5,000 and got 2,500 as a grant. Now that's been reduced. So if you spend, I don't know, 2,750 or €2,800, you'll get the full €2,500 grant. And a second application is available to businesses that may have received a trading online voucher in the past. And I just have a small point down there, webinars. It is essential that businesses applying attend a webinar so as to understand how best to get the value from the voucher, and then also to encourage people who have started to sell online to take a look at An Post's new offer for SMEs, which is really good and offers discounts for sending of parcels. Microfinance Ireland, so the loans range from €5,000 to €50,000, loan terms up to 3 years. First 6 months, as you can see, 0% and 0 repayments, and a reduced interest rate of 4.5% for Leo applications that come through the local enterprise office, and 5.5% for direct applications. And just to make the point, what we've been encouraging people to think about is people are very conscious, they want to hold on to cash and they don't want to take on more debt. But it may be worthwhile looking at applying for a microfinance loan and get the offer of the loan and then seeing whether you wanted or needed to draw down that money. So you can apply to microfinance, be offered a loan and then not draw it down for 90 to even 120 days. So that gives the business plenty of time to stop and evaluate and say, what ways, how quickly is the market opening up, and is it appropriate and sensible to take down a loan at this point in time. Thanks, Keelan. Then the next one is the Restart Grant. So this one was just launched last Friday, and it's been managed through through Offaly County Council, and it is direct grant aid of between €2,000 and €10,000 based on the commercial rates bill from 2019. So the grants would be equivalent to the rates bill of the business in 2019. So if as a business you paid €3,000 in rates last year, or that was your bill, €3,000, then that is the value of the grant if you're successful. So the scheme applies to small businesses with a turnover of under €5 million and employing 50 people or less. And the business would have to be closed or impacted by at least 25% reduction in turnover out to the 30th of June 2020. And the monies can be used to maybe get prospect screening or different works done in the business so as to make it safe for employees and customers, or it could be used to pay the likes of an insurance bill or any other costs the business has. So to apply for the grant, it's a straightforward process. You just go on there to offaly.ie/restart grant. We have a helpline and we also have an email support as well if people have issues or questions in filling out the form. So thank you. The other one I just thought I wanted to mention, Offaly County Council is just launching a pilot Shopfront Enhancement scheme. So this will be a maximum grant of 50% of the costs up to a maximum grant payment of €2,000. So if you were to spend €4,000 on redoing the front and the shop front, you would potentially get a grant of €2,000. So as it's a pilot, it's open for applications firstly from businesses and retail premises in the main towns Birr, Tullamore and Eden Derry. The closing date is the 25th of June, 12 noon, and the full details are on the Offaly County Council website, so offaly.ie. Then I've just added a few useful resources for people. So NSAI, the National Standards Authority of Ireland, has a great website and a helpline and a number of different reports to help people to approach reopening of their business. And what we're finding is a lot of people are availing of that information and the helpline, but they're also attending the relevant seminars and webinars that we're running to help, I suppose, to clarify any of the points in that. There's a really good report from the department. There, in yellow, you can see the front cover of it. So it's on the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation. It's updated regularly and it's all the supports for business, all the financial opportunities and funding opportunities for business and a whole range across all of government, the supports for business. The national network of local enterprise offices, the 31 enterprise offices, we have the localenterprise.ie/response, and that's where again all our supports are there. And then I've just added our own website, localenterprise.ie/Offaly. Just one last slide, I think, from me. So just to, I suppose, to make the point, there is help out there. And I would encourage people, retailers and businesses to avail of the mentoring and guidance, to avail of relevant supports. So as I say, perhaps look to apply for the likes of microfinance funding. And then if you don't need to take it down, that's fine. But at least you have the option when you may need the cash liquidity. To take the time to examine the business model and the offering. David gave some really good tips on that and how businesses may look at their product offering and taking into account that it's a domestic market for the time being. And where possible, to use this time wisely to build a strong online presence together with the physical store and see how you can transform and position for recovery. So delighted to take any questions afterwards, or people can email the local enterprise office. Thank you. And over to Jim now. Jim Power.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I've lost you there. Sorry, I lost you there for a second. Okay, Orla, thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to take you through pretty quickly the global economic backdrop at the moment, what's happening, and then feed that into the Irish economy, look at the impact of COVID-19 and finally just look at some of the business issues around it. When I sat down in early January to look at the year ahead, we came from a background in 2019 where global economic growth reached the lowest levels since 2008-9. And that was largely due to the ongoing trade dispute between China and the United States and also Brexit. And in January, I believe that the outlook for the year ahead for the world was a little bit better because Trump and China would sort their trade difficulties ahead of a presidential election in November. Britain would avoid a hard Brexit on the 31st of January. So that was setting us up reasonably nicely for a better global backdrop. And then, of course, in late February, early March, COVID-19 hit like a steam train. There's been a dramatic decline in economic activity as large swathes of the world economy have been forced to shut down. The International Monetary Fund is describing it as the sharpest economic slowdown since the 1920s. We are seeing a remarkably strong official policy response to the crisis. Interest rates have been slashed everywhere where possible. Central banks are engaging in massive programs of quantitative easing to reduce the cost of borrowing for governments. Governments are engaging in very significant fiscal stimulus packages. And what Orla just outlined there to you over the last 20 minutes or so is part of the Irish fiscal package. And around the world, we're seeing all sorts of fiscal packages being introduced, which is good news. So in a nutshell, we're seeing a dramatic downturn in economic activity. There's been a dramatically strong official policy response, which will continue. And that does set us up reasonably well for recovery. The question, of course, is how quick will the recovery happen? How long will it take to return to pre-COVID levels of economic activity? A difficult question to answer because the recovery will depend on the path of the virus. What we've seen to varying degrees in different countries over the last 3 or 4 weeks has been a gradual opening up of businesses around the world and of economies. And the hope would be, of course, that that process continues smoothly, but there is always the risk that you will get further outbreaks of the virus, which will necessitate further shutdowns of small parts of economies and so on. So it's likely that the path to recovery will be a risky one. It'll be challenging. And as I say, it'll be driven heavily by health concerns rather than economic issues. I believe there will be a recovery over the next 18 months, but I believe it will be a sort of a modest rather than a very strong V-shaped recovery. And for the next 18 months, I think it looks very likely that global economic activity will be growing below its potential, but at least it will be moving in the right direction after a dramatic decline in activity, which sets up a reasonable scene for Ireland. This is the latest EU Commission forecast for the world, for the European economy. And you can see there, pretty dramatic declines in 2020, obviously shrouded in deep uncertainty because of how the virus is developing. For 2021, a strong recovery is expected. However, I would hasten to add, number one, it is subject to incredible health risks. And secondly, the year-on-year growth rates we're seeing there in 2021 are exaggerated because we're coming off such a low base in 2020. But, I am confident that the world economy over the next 18 months will get gradually better. Of course, what would turn that sort of recovery into a V-shaped recovery would be the delivery of an effective vaccine. So the health consideration is absolutely key to this. Moving on to the next slide, Keelan. Looking at the Irish situation, since the last week in March, we've effectively seen large swathes of our economy shut down. We have actually 1.2 million people currently receiving some type of COVID-related government support. So a lot of people have lost their jobs or are being supported by government schemes at the moment. That is all incredibly expensive, and the Taoiseach stated in the Dáil this morning that the COVID unemployment payments would persist beyond the 8th of June. And he didn't say for how long, because he actually doesn't know at this stage. But there is a view, you know, we are going to have to spend money to help businesses, to help households survive this unprecedented economic lockdown. And the reality is that the Irish government, and indeed this is being permitted at an EU level, will have to accept higher levels of government deficits. We just have to accept that. And back in 2007, 2008, the last time we got some sort of a shock, an economic shock like this, we immediately followed it with fiscal austerity, as in tax increases and cuts in public expenditure. I am absolutely adamant this time round that fiscal austerity cannot follow this. I mean, the imperative over the next couple of years will be to support the economy, particularly to support businesses, as long as necessary to get our economy back on track, because the only way we will actually reduce the deficit ultimately is not by increasing taxes and cutting spending. That would just risk turning a recession into a depression. We just need to get economic growth back on track, and as economic growth comes back on track, tax revenues will start to increase again, and downward pressure on unemployment-related public expenditure will happen. So you get a virtuous cycle of strong growth, stronger growth, leading to an improvement in the public finances. I think it is really important to point out, okay, we will have to accept significantly higher deficits over the next couple of years. And the reason why that is the case, well, obviously, a lot of money is being thrown into households to make up for the earnings that have been lost, but there's also a significant financial support going into businesses in varying forms, and Orla outlined some of it. The government's COVID wage support scheme is another part of it. But there's two distinct elements of the business support. One is that during the period of lockdown, it is when business cash flows in many cases disappear, and where a lot of expenses continue to build up. It is essential during that period that government steps in and provides whatever support is required to make sure that as the various stages of opening up the economy arrive and different businesses are in a position to come back to life again, we need to make sure that those businesses still exist. Because at the end of the day, without functioning businesses, we will not get the economy back in a growth phase. We will not re-employ the 1 million plus people who are currently out of work because of COVID-19. So that's one stage, making sure businesses survive. But once those businesses reopen, the fund doesn't end there, because for many businesses to varying degrees, you know, the next 12, 18 months will be challenging. David has highlighted very clearly the sort of restrictions that will be on the retail sector. Likewise with pubs, restaurants, hotels, there will be social distancing protocols, there will be health protocols, there'll be, trying to manage the whole health issue of this will cost business and will also reduce the volume of business that will come through premises. So it is essential that businesses receive remedial support and attention for probably the next 12, 18 months after they reopen. The good news is that Ireland is in a good place to borrow. Thankfully, we did not default on our national debt 12 years ago, as some were arguing for, because if we did, we would be in a very different position today in terms of how we can borrow. The bottom line is the Irish government can borrow lots of money at the moment. It is doing so at very, very low rates of interest, virtually close to zero. So that's good. We can borrow to get us out of this. Another factor is that a lot of incomes have been maintained over the last 3 months, either through employer payments or through state payments. So, incomes have continued to come into most households, but the ability to spend that money has been seriously curtailed. So it is estimated that this year there will be an increase of somewhere between 12 and 15 billion euro in personal savings, because quite simply people will not be in a position to spend the money on foreign holidays, cars, whatever. So at some stage when confidence returns, those savings will find their way back into the system and actually accelerate the economic recovery story. Recovery will come, but the recovery will be driven by medical fundamentals, and we really need to watch just how the virus runs through our country over the coming weeks and months to see how quickly people will become confident enough to get out there and engage in economic activity again. Moving on to the next slide, Keelan. This is a sectoral impact, and I say in descending order, but I'm a bit nuanced about that, because every sector of the economy is experiencing difficulties because of this. But if you want to create a hierarchy, obviously, given the collapse in international travel and tourism, those businesses exposed to tourism are in serious trouble at the moment. Pubs, restaurants, hotels, the non-grocery retail sector, which was forced to shut down and is, gradually at this stage reopening, but it will be reopening under much different conditions, as David has outlined, in terms of social distancing and other health protocols. So that's going to have an impact. The motor industry, which opened up on the 18th of May, but it was shut down for a couple of months. And of course, the problem was that even pre-COVID-19, up to the year to the 15th of March, for example, new car sales were running just over 6% down on last year. So even ahead of COVID-19, the motor industry was finding life challenging. The construction sector was forced to shut down. I was never terribly concerned about construction because, once the sites start to reopen, there is still a massive demand out there for construction output, not least on the housing side. So the construction sector, will rebound pretty quickly. The not-for-profit sector has taken a real hammering because most of the events like the Dublin City Marathon and so on, where they raise a lot of their money, their fundraising has been all blown off course. So serious problems there. The agri-food sector, I suppose at some levels has been doing well because there is now an appreciation of the value of a secure, safe supply of home-produced food. But still, even there, the prices being paid to farmers under downward pressure at the moment. Cattle prices, pig prices, they are all down at the minute. So despite the strong growth in the sale of food and food products, it's a challenging environment. For manufacturing, it's a mixed picture. The chemical and pharma side, which accounts for 64% of our exports, and which is very important, for example, to the economy of the Southwest around Cork, it's doing very well, but more traditional manufacturing activity seriously curtailed. Retail grocery, has been, in terms of business volumes, has been doing well, but of course, grocery retailers are also subject to all of the social distancing and the costs involved and the business volumes that it impedes and so on. And then you have the pharmacy sector. Obviously, the demand for pharmacy product, as in medicines, has remained very strong throughout this, but non-medicines sales have absolutely collapsed, the more discretionary type. And pharmacies are also having to engage in very strict social distancing and health cleansing and so on protocols. So that's the sort of sectoral impact. There is no sector that has been unaffected by this, but the degree of pain does vary from sector to sector. The opening up of all of those sectors is now underway. It's going to be gradual, it's going to be challenging, it is going to be expensive. And hence, as I said earlier, there is, in my view, a huge requirement to make sure that the support does not end once the businesses reopen, that business and trading conditions will be challenging for the next 12, 18 months. Moving on, this is the most recent forecast from the Department of Finance. It's very like the EU forecast a few minutes back, or a few slides back. We're seeing a pretty dramatic decline in economic activity this year. A strong recovery, well, statistically a strong recovery in 2021, but two health warnings here again. One is that this will be very heavily dependent on health issues and, you know, how well the virus is kept under control as the economies reopen, because the one thing we really do not want to see is our health people advising a further lockdown at some stage in the future. The second health warning is that these year-on-year growth rates are exaggerated because of the low base that we're coming from in 2020. But, you know, nevertheless, it does show, and this looks like a realistic forecast, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We will come through this. We have dug ourselves out of worse holes, say back after 2007, 2008. So the Irish economy will assert itself again, but I think it would be naive not to recognise the challenges over the next couple of years. Moving on to the next slide, Keelan. The long-term impact of this, you know, there will be a massive government debt legacy coming out of this. The only way we can really address this is through promoting economic activity. Global travel will be slow to regain confidence, and there is a spat going on at the moment about quarantining visitors coming into the country for 14 days and so on. But these debates are happening in every country in the world at the moment. The bottom line is that people do not feel safe to fly at the moment, and it's going to take some time to regain confidence. So for businesses that are dependent on tourism and travel, very, very challenging. Social distancing protocols will limit business volumes, and they will increase the cost of doing business. There's no doubt about that. We are and have been over the last couple of years seeing the growth of anti-free trade economic nationalism. This will be heightened by COVID-19 because, you know, you are seeing countries trying to impose significant constraints on the movement of people across borders. We need to watch that one, that it doesn't become, COVID-19 doesn't become an excuse to drive an economic nationalism agenda. Food security and safety, as I've mentioned, I think a lot of people were very concerned at the beginning of this that the food supply chain here would break down. It has held up admirably, and I think it should make people focus on, number one, the importance of our grocery retailers and what they've delivered over the last 3 months or so, and secondly, the importance of having a safe, secure supply of domestically produced food. We're seeing a significant migration to online. One of the challenges for bricks and mortar retailers will be to get people back into the shops again, reacquaint them with shopping is going to be very important. Remote working, there is a view that remote working is just going to take over and that it's going to have a very negative impact on commercial property. I tend to disagree with that to some extent, because most people and most business owners I talk to at the moment, you ask them what's their main ambition at the moment: to get back to work, to get my staff back into the premises again. So remote working works very well for some, but not for all. But it still will become a greater feature of the landscape. And for some place, you know, like Offaly, putting maybe in Tullamore someplace a remote working hub with high-speed broadband, you know, could really promote the whole remote working agenda. The final point is that it is essential not to allow an economic crisis morph into a banking crisis. That's why business support is so important. It is vital to protect business and to support re-employment in the economy. It is vital, as I say, to prevent a banking crisis from erupting. I think judgment and enforcement of debts, you know, will have to be forced to take cognizance of the exceptional circumstances. And for any business that's having difficulty getting repaid or paying, I think there was never a greater need to work with and communicate with the other side of the transaction, because we will need forbearance and flexibility of the type that we've never seen before. Full disclosure is essential, because at the end of the day, we have to do whatever it takes to make sure that as many businesses as possible reopen over the coming weeks, and more importantly, that after they reopen, that they survive a more challenging economic environment over the next couple of years. I remain hopeful, I remain optimistic, but one would be naive not to recognize the challenges that are out there. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was really, really excellent, and you know, very insightful. I suppose all the economic data, some of it pretty scary, all right, but I think there are some positives there, and I think we need to kind of work on those. Just you mentioned the hubs. We have 5 hubs in Offaly. 3 of them are supported by Offaly County Council, and yes, we had found, I suppose, just in the run up to the lockdown, and that really could see significant increased numbers coming to them. We probably see as we come back and people start to go back to work that we will see increased demand, but on a staggered basis for the hubs. And I would imagine we'll also start seeing more demand for meeting rooms and for training. So the people perhaps will work from home a lot, but then come and use the hubs for you know, for meetings and so on. I think it's a benefit too. There's a lot of people, and David had mentioned it earlier, travelling from Offaly in the Midlands up to the Greater Dublin area on a daily basis. And so if there is an increase in remote working, I think it should support retail and business within the county. So I don't know if David, you want to come in for say a few words and add to this?
No, just to say thanks, Orla, and thanks to Jim, and thanks to Keelan, my colleague. So look, people are dying to reopen. They're a little nervous, but we'll get through it. And having a small bit of cash is a great start. So we just need to all support one another, both our landlords, tenants, our local authorities, and we'll get through it. So just to say, good luck, Offaly, and look forward to having a pint up there with some of you guys soon. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Jim, and thanks, Keelan, too. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.